We will get started in just a moment. It's on the dot, past. So,
okay. Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to our interactive session on hybrid working. I'm Amy from AbilityNet, and to provide my audio description, I'm a 45-year-old woman with blonde hair, wearing a pink jumper and quite an excited smile because I've been really looking forward to this fantastic session. And today I'm co-hosting with the wonderful Lucy Ruck from the Business Disability Forum.
So that probably leads me to introduce myself. I am a white female. I'm also 45. I didn't realise.
Twins.
It's the hot summer of 76 in the UK, yeah. If any of you remember it, as my mum often reminds me. So I'm a white female with dark brown wavy hair, wearing a blue jumper, sat in my home office with an attractive radiator over my shoulder there, which I always think looks awful in the background, but it's you know, we're all working from home, aren't we? And it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to the session today and what we're going to be covering. Hopefully you know, because you signed up to it and you've logged in. But within most organisations, colleagues have worked from home for many years, but never so many have as they do now. We've all learnt to adjust to home working. Some have really flourished under that. Some have been okay with it. And for some, it's been an absolute necessity. And yet for others, they cannot wait to return to the office. But how does business continue to be effective with the variety of ways we are now working? Home, office, or home and office? How can we be inclusive without being exclusive?
Yeah, really lots to go at today, and we're going to be sort of breaking the discussion into the individual and then the collaborative perspective. We're going to discuss the challenges in both contexts and talk some potential solutions from our panel and hopefully the wider audience as well. If we get time, we might touch on the environmental side of things too. So we'll be talking people, productivity and planet. And as I said earlier, this is really an interactive session. We'd welcome any comments throughout about what you and your organisations are doing around hybrid working. So please do jump in the chat and share. So I would like to welcome the panel as well. So if you could please introduce yourselves. I'll go round my screen, and we're starting with Natalie Rainier from Microsoft.
Nice one with the last name.
Did I get it right?
More or less, yes, in the French way. Perfect. French way, perfect.
Oh, sorry.
No, totally okay. I was just telling Lucy as well, my name is impossible. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie from Microsoft. I'm the Western European Teams lead. So since the pandemic, it's been a little bit crazy. I've been living remote and hybrid in every possible sense of the way. As you can think, I'm a 49-year-old white woman. I've got short hair and I'm wearing a green jumper. And I'm accompanied by a white ragdoll that you might see passing by the camera from time to time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Natalie. And then let's go to Dr. Nicola Millard from BT.
Hello there. So yes, my name is Nicola. I don't know how to describe myself apart from I have a good face for radio, but I'm white. I am 50 something. I have mad hair, and I'm wearing a waistcoat, which is my trademark. I used to be BT's futurologist. I am very glad I no longer have the world's weirdest job title. And everyone always used to ask me, did I have a crystal ball when I had that job title? I do, by the way. It doesn't work, so I have to work slightly harder for my living than reading tea leaves or crystal balls. I have a slightly more boring job title now. That does not mean my job is boring. I am a principal innovation partner. I am part of BT's innovation team. I am based in the east of England, in Ipswich, and the reason I'm in my kitchen at the moment, but normally I'm based in a lovely place called Adastral Park, which is our main research and innovation headquarters. That's me.
Cool. And so Rena Wharton from AbilityNet.
Hi, my name's Rena. I'm an accessibility and usability consultant at AbilityNet. I'm not on video, but my little emoji as my kind of picture on Teams is true. I do have blue hair, and I'm in my 20s and I'm female. So I tend to kind of test websites and mobile apps and advise on accessibility standards and things like that.
Thanks, Rena. And I do believe we have Dr. Melissa Highton as well from the University of Edinburgh. Are you with us?
Apologies for being late. Can you see
Oh,
me?
that's okay. Fashionably late. It's fine. That's fine. And actually, I think it was about 1 minute, which was great. It kept the anticipation going. So welcome to the panel. I don't know.
Are you doing introductions?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for those of you who can see me, I'm a white woman. I have my hair wrapped in a blue scarf. So I don't know whether that means we all have blue hair or look like we have blue hair. Yeah, so I'm Melissa Highton. I work at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm particularly look after a whole bunch of the people who work in technology at the University of Edinburgh. So University of Edinburgh is a huge employer in the city, and we have an enormous estate. We have more than 600 buildings across this city. So as well as being a big employer, we have a big estate. And so thinking about how to make our workplaces into hybrid is very much something that is top of the agenda for the university at the moment. And we've done some research about our staff's experience.
Brilliant. And we're looking forward to hearing all about that. So shall we go on to our first section then, Lucy?
I was going to say, I think we're going to have a lot to cover, and I don't think we're going to be stuck for information from you guys. So I'm going to fire away with our first question, which is quite broad. So I'm going to pick on different people and say, can you answer this bit or whatever, because otherwise we're all going to talk at once. So the first thing we're looking at is what you and your customers are doing around hybrid working, and more broadly, what does hybrid working mean to you? Now, I'm going to pick on Nicola for this one because we had a conversation around hybrid, and I was really interested by your description around it as well, because it was a little different from what I'd heard before. And I think, you know, we can all learn from this stuff. So if you could just fill us in on your thoughts around that, please, Nicola.
Sure, no problem. So as context, I innovate both with and for our UK customers, largely corporate customers and public sector. And so I also lead on our Future of Work initiative. So a lot of the conversations I'm having at the moment around what is the future of work does involve this hybrid word. The trouble is there are a lot of words that are being used to describe the future of work, whether it's agile work or digital workplaces or flexible working, and hybrid is just another word. And I am an academic, so I like to define things. So hybrid has been around for a long time. I think a lot of the conversations I'm currently having with people tend to be around how many days should I be in the office? Should it be 3? Should it be 2? And I think that's not the right conversation to have. And particularly when you start to look at what hybrid means, the purest definition of hybrid that I've found is that hybrid effectively untethers you from both place and time. So looking at those two factors is quite interesting. Now, I always use an analogy as well at this point, because I think when we use this word hybrid, my favorite hybrid in the world is the Zedonk. Now, the Zedonk is half zebra, it's half donkey. It looks like a donkey with zebra socks, frankly, but it doesn't wake up every morning and go, am I a zebra this morning or am I a donkey? Because it's a different breed. And I think that's what we're looking at in terms of hybrid work. So if we disconnect work from time and place, what we're left with is the work. So I think we have an opportunity at the moment to look at how work works. How do we reinvent work? If we start to untether it, what does that mean? What opportunities does it give us? And absolutely, with the climate crisis as well, very much in play, to your point, Amy, at the very beginning, how do we reinvent work to be good for the people, the planet, and also the organisation? So I think it's an exciting time from a future workplace perspective at the moment, but hybrid is quite a difficult way of working as well. And I think as you delve down into it, you can see it is quite complex. And I think my anxiety is that people really do need to approach this from a very much, we don't have all the answers, we need an experimental mindset here. Not everything is going to work. We are going to have some really horrible hybrids as we go into the future. And let's not just say, oh, well, let's go back to what it was before, because I think we have learned an awful lot during the pandemic and learned that work does not have to be within the four walls of an office. So yeah, I think this is a really exciting time.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting. I think there's something there around the flexibility that business needs to adapt to and not get set in this. I think we've had to in the last 18 months, we're almost 2 years now, almost feels like a lifetime, doesn't it? But, you know, we've really got to flex a little bit more with that, haven't we? Just to say as well, if you've got any questions for our panel or any thoughts, please do post those in the chat, because we'd love to hear from you as well. Any other thoughts? I mean, maybe around research or anything? Melissa, I think you've got some things to say around this as well, haven't you?
Yes, and actually I was just very struck by that definition of hybrid working as releasing yourself from the tyranny of time and space, because that's of course what we used to say was the main advantage of online learning and flexible learning, that you didn't have to come to a particular lecture theatre at a particular time to hear a particular teacher talk for exactly 1 hour on a topic. And of course, so much of education, the idea that our education gets broken down into 1 hour chunks, is actually because of the timetable and the bookings of rooms, not because the subjects or the teachers think that education should be chunked into 1 hour chunks. So actually, yes, that opportunity to rethink what we do in terms of time and space is quite exciting, although I think it's a big leap for many people to think about things in that way. So I think, yeah, so the universities particularly have had to think about what people's perceptions of whether you're getting value for money from your university when we are in fact doing technology-led, very flexible delivery, which was what people all said they wanted before, but then not so much in the last couple of years. And I think in terms of getting colleagues and students to come back onto campus, and the many thousands of professional staff who work in higher education, what's been important to us is to think about, as well as what the nature of hybrid might be, but also how it would be of interest or have different experience for different kinds of people. And so the research that we've done has really focused on the intersectional, trying to think about the data that we have about the staff in the institution and the many different home lives and identities and structures and working patterns that they might have, so that when we propose models of different working, we can make sure that we have multiple voices in that discussion and make sure that the models that we put forward are going to work for a wide range of people. And this would be disruptive, because in the past, office working has mostly been tailored around some perhaps more restricted criteria of people who have thought about what work might be like. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to get a diverse set of intersectional voices into the data about what work and workplace should be like.
Yeah, interesting. And I know we talk a lot about, and I'm sure a lot of you joining us today will talk about nothing about us without us. And it is about that inclusion and including the people who are actually impacted by this. I had a really piece talking to Christine Hempel at Open Inclusion a while ago, and she was talking about actually don't think about including your typical people you would in your research. If you try and reach the people at the outside and aim for those, so think about as diverse as you could probably get. If it works for them, it'll actually work for everyone else inside of that. And I think that was really interesting. It's about actually, you're not doing it properly if you're just catering for this big number. It looks like a big number. Work for the most extreme, and then it will actually work for everyone. So that sort of really mirrors that as well. And Natalie, as well, from a Microsoft perspective, you know, the developments within Teams and, you know, the way we now do stuff, the world has completely changed under this hybrid model. Did you want to chip in on your thoughts around it?
Yeah, I would love to. The definition, like Nicola was mentioning, really just hits what we're thinking about hybrid work as well. And I think one of the big difficulties that we're seeing with hybrid work, right before it was all office, then all of a sudden we were all pushed working from remote. The difficulty that we're seeing with our customers as well is hybrid work means that it's not everybody working from home or everybody working in the office. It's that combination that gives new challenges. Last week, as an example, for the first time and only time this calendar year, we actually met the team live in person. We had a brainstorm. We went to the office. Obviously, all the technology is there. One person had to dial in. Even for us, it's a different way of meeting, keeping in mind that there's somebody on the screen that you need to include in every possible way in that brainstorm. And that makes it a lot harder than everybody is on the same mold, right? If everybody, that was also a big advantage for a lot of people that, you know, even if I'm a person that works a lot from home, most of my career I've been working from home. And then often you feel kind of like, yeah, I'm the only one working from home. I'm really sorry, and feeling included. Right now, well, everybody was remote. Everybody was on the same path. Everybody was just feeling in the same audience. Now, again, we're getting into emotion where we really need to educate and train people. How do you make sure that when you have a meeting and you're sitting with 6 in an office and there's 3 people that are attending from home or wherever they are, that there is also that inclusiveness? I mean, Microsoft went completely remote as soon as the pandemic started. And we did we did a lot of research as well, both internally and externally. Now, the interesting part about that is that we have a kind of a paradox going on. Depending on what generation you're from, when you look at the people that, you know, would you like to go back to the office? It's like, and why? It's about 58% of the employees that said, yes, we want to go back to the office. But the same 58% also wanted to go and make sure that it could work from home as well. And both the reason, interestingly enough, why they wanted to go back to the office or why they wanted to stay at home was focus, being able to focus on work. Because some generations feel like, especially the younger generation, I feel, they were much more, can we please go back to the office? Can we please go back to the office? Because that's focusing. Whereas the older generations, you know, they felt like work-life balance was easier as they were working from home, and they could focus more. Because if you are in the office, people come up to you, right? It's kind of hard to say, do not disturb, like, you know, a big thing on my forehead. I actually have t-shirts made like that right before the pandemic, which I was never able to use. When you're at home, you got the technology to actually say, hey, I'm hiding, I'm doing my work, and just work really focused. So we're seeing a lot of difference there. That we can actually see in the research. But what is clear is that out of all research, whether we did in Western Europe last year, the work trend index that we did on our own people, or that we did to 30,000 people, everybody's saying we really need to have that flexibility to actually work a number of days from home because the world has indeed changed. And about 68% of the employers actually confirm that, yes, we need to get back to that, but they also need guidance on how to do that. How do you manage people in that sense? How do you, you know, even for us, we have a big meeting next week in Copenhagen. It's like, yeah, it's going to be hybrid as well. So you don't need to rush. You don't need to feel like you have to travel. The social pressure is always there as well. So you, as an employer, you also need to manage that part of hybrid work now all of a sudden.
Yeah, and you're going to feel you're missing out if you're dialing into something like that. You know, is it a lesser experience? Is it focused on the people in the room? And it's that we've all had it. It's the FOMO, isn't it? The fear of missing out that I think we've all struggled from. And it's how do you formalize the informal that just happens when people are in the same physical space? Correct. That's a real challenge, I think, to get right, isn't it? So that is really interesting as well. And I a lot of that really resonated with me, Natalie. So thanks for sharing. I've been a home worker for the last 7.5 years. So actually, the last 18 months has been great because it's really evened the playing field for me. Yeah. So that's been fantastic. I wanted to come on to a more personal approach here now as well, because we talked a little bit about sort of how it's impacted more broadly. But I think, you know, again, that nothing about us without us. Rena, I know that you have some views on this. We're going to share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, so I started at AbilityNet just over 2 years ago. It's my first full-time kind of permanent job. I did a couple of kind of work placements or internships before I joined AbilityNet, and I learned in those. I did those in an office, or so one of them was 2 days a week, and that was in an office, and the other one was full time for 3 months. And after about 3 weeks, I had a complete meltdown. I'm autistic. I couldn't deal with the office environment. And, 3 weeks into my 3-month internship, I had a complete meltdown. I'd completely burnt out, and I couldn't continue the way I was going. So I learned from those, and knew that, when I joined Ability, I needed to do something different. And so I joined AbilityNet as a full-time home worker, and it's just completely changed everything for me. I didn't know whether I'd be able to work full time. Something like 16% of autistic adults work full time, and the fact that I've been given the flexibility to work from home has enabled me to be in that 16%. And it just it made so much difference. Things like going into an office and having to do the work, but also like we've touched on, people coming up and asking you questions and things like that, and it's like, but I'm in the middle of focusing, and now you've blocked my train of thought, and now I have to start all over again. But I'm first going to have to spend 5 minutes switching to your task, do what you want me to do, and then spend 5 minutes switching to the task that I was going to do anyway, and by which point I've probably completely forgotten what I was going to do, and now have to start all over again. And so that ability to ignore people until I'm ready makes a huge difference to me.
And we did have a little catch up last week, didn't we? And I didn't want any spoilers, so I said, don't tell me about it, but you want to talk to us about cutlery, I believe.
Yeah, so I use two, I suppose they're interlocking different theories. So a lot of people that I've met kind of know of the spoon theory, which is about energy levels and being able to do things. So like getting up might take a spoon. You only have so many spoons a day. Making your breakfast might take a spoon. Things at work might take a spoon. And once you've run out of spoons, you need to do something that restores those spoons. But then the other one that goes next to it is the fork theory, which I know a lot fewer people have heard about. And that one's more about stressors. So that might be a light flickering and there's some noise in the background, and they're stresses that are almost like forks sticking in me, and each fork can be a different size. So someone might want to have a big important conversation about, say, a financial issue or something like that, and it's like, okay, that's a really big fork. I've not got space for that fork, so I need to get rid of something. So maybe I go turn the light off, and then I've got the space for that other fork, and they work together. So I view it in the sense that the spoon theory is about energy, and having the energy and the time that I'm not spending restoring my spoons to do stuff. And then the fork theory is, I guess, stresses, and for me it's executive functioning. So I might not have the reserves to do the executive functioning of cooking myself a dinner if I've had other forks pushed into me that day. And relating that back to work is that if I'm working in an office, I've got the forks and spoons of getting to work. So that might be traffic. It'll be spoons getting to work, that's energy in itself. And then if something goes wrong, a road is closed or there's traffic or something like that, that's a fork. And then I get into work and I've got lights and people and noises and smells that are not what I like and what I find comfortable. That's another fork. And so for me, I always felt like I'm going into an office so that I can spend less time and energy being productive just because you want me in an office. I can be a much better worker from home, where I can control my environment, my temperature, what food I eat, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas, I can't do that when I'm in an office. I have no control over that stuff. And so for me, and using those theories to kind of give an example, it brings it much more to the fore about why it's so important to me.
We've got lots of people in the chat concurring with you, Rena. I'm just going to quickly say as well, there's some people getting a few difficulties with the audio from some speakers. So if anyone's got headphones, or if you can just stay as close to your mics as possible would be fab. But sorry, back to you, Rena. I just thought I'd mention that whilst we had a moment.
Just checking, can you hear me okay? If not, I don't want to risk breaking it and disappearing, but let me know if you can't, and I will try and plug in a headset. I'm more than happy to do that. Rena, what you were saying then, I'd say I knew there was something about cutlery. This sort of resonated with me, and I know I've heard other people talk about it, and it made me think of the video that Lena Hackett, the BBC, created, which was like a video game with their energy levels being sapped and people throwing things at her that she wasn't expecting to have to do. And again, I'll find that and post that in the chat in a bit, because it's a really useful visual reminder of that. And also I remember once being in a meeting room, again with Lena, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing, and she sat there and she went, I'm going to dim the lights. This is too bright for me. I can't concentrate. And everyone in the room sat there and went, oh, that's so much nicer. And I kind of think if you just made it work and we just say, actually, I'm finding this really bright. And it was essential for her that we made that change so she could focus, because it was obviously really difficult for her, but it actually enhanced everyone else's experience. So I think there's some really nice messaging in there, and about sort of sharing that best practice of things that work for us, and actually they'll probably work for other people. That's one of the key things I take away. If you struggle with it, someone else probably does too, but maybe to different. I'm not comparing the two, but it only helps. So I think it's always useful to talk about these things. Any other messages in the chat? I know there's been a lot of love for Rena and kind of understanding the sort of the cutlery, as I'm going to now call it. Anything else?
Definitely others talking about spoons and forks affecting their working environment and how being able to come away from, you know, we've got a comment here around open plan library with a large echoey auditorium being such a challenging space to work in.
Yeah, I remember going to university and sitting in the library. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to study in here. Apart from anything else, I can't study when it's quiet. I need something else. And I just found university libraries so difficult to work in. I thought they were the worst part of the university.
It's ironic, isn't it? I saw there was a question in there just now actually around what days do you have to be in the office, and I think that's really varying organisation to organisation from what I'm seeing and hearing. Some are saying come back when you're ready, come back as little or as often as you want to, what works for you. I've seen other companies say we want everyone back in the office full time. They are the minority, but you do see it come up within business, and I think there's something around the culture. I think it's a dangerous approach to say you have to be back in the office full time. I think for me, if you have that approach, and that is entirely up to you as your organization, you will lose skill and you will lose talent, because people will go where it is more flexible. Natalie, I can see you nodding, but did you want to come in on that at all?
Yeah, no, totally. And we noticed that when we interviewed and we did the research, more than 40% of the people were looking for a different job. Obviously, the pandemic has changed mindsets and everything else as well. But what has become clear is that those people are attached to that flexible work. There's been an interesting discussion in Belgium over the past couple of days, because today we're also going again into stronger measures because of COVID. And one of them was we need to go back into mandatory remote work. I mean, we have to just do that. It's been crazy what the feedback has been from employers and employees with regards to, no, we shouldn't be doing that. We're just going back. So you can also still feel that motion, even though most of them are saying, yes, we want to go back partly. There's still a lot of friction with regards to, should you go back and really mandatory back from working from home, or are we going to just let the employees decide when they want to come in? Interesting enough, there was some research that I read this morning in the newspaper that said not allowing employees to work from where they want to, when they want to, it just literally adds burnout risk up to 40%. Basically because they can't decide, listen, today is a working from home day, tomorrow I need to actually go to the office, or vice versa. So that is a very important impact motion as well, that often we don't think about how that's going to go, right? So that's a very important part to go. And we've seen with customers in public sector in certain countries where everybody mandatory had to go back to the office, where you can already start feeling that effect as well. Because let's face it, it was very hard to actually everybody go online. It was tiring. It was more meetings and everything else. Going back to the office and doing meetings live is actually tiring again as well, because we're not used to that anymore. So we really need to balance that out, because it's all the arrangements with kids, with the family, with the food, with the commute. The stress is adding up to it again as well. So that's a very important part to think about as well with hybrid work.
Yeah, very much so. And I know when we did our big workplace adjustment survey, looking at what disabled people wanted as adjustments, the most requested adjustments was that flexible remote working. And so many people were told, and this was like 2 or 3 years ago now. So of course people were told, no, can't do that, can't do home working. Funny, overnight that all changed when you had to do it, didn't it? So that's going to be an interesting argument when people go back to the office now and go, actually, for my disability, I'm much better and more effective at home. Can you accommodate that? And they'll be like, interesting discussions ahead, I think. Have we got one more quick question from the audience, and then I'm going to hand over the questions to you, Amy, for the next section.
There's various comments, and it really is very much around personal reasons for requiring to work in a specific way that is actually, you know, enabling people to do their best work for the organisation, exactly as Rena just described. And I think you and I, when we were first talking about this session, we talked about new normal, but then what about new reasonable in terms of what was considered to be reasonable as a reasonable adjustment before the pandemic? That has to have shifted now that those myths around remote working have been busted. And there's a gentleman who shared it. There's so many comments in the chat, I can't find anyone. But a gentleman who's blind and deaf, and he said he's now a full-time home worker and believes that would never have happened 2 years ago. So how fantastic is that for him to be able to control his environment to work productively? Yeah.
And when I used to go in the office, I was so disruptive. I ended up not getting my laptop out because I actually couldn't get on and work. And actually, I decided in the end, a colleague did the same thing. We both decided, that's fine. I've come into network, I've come in for a purpose and to meet with people, not to sit there answering emails, and don't feel bad about that. And I wonder if that's maybe the way it's going to go. You come in for a purpose and to network with colleagues, and that's just the way it works. It's just going to be different.
And also for the water cooler conversations, right? Because that's where the innovation lies in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, I'm aware I've taken up quite a bit of time, and you've got some more questions to ask.
No,
there's no way we're getting onto environment, is there?
Yeah. Oh well, we'll save it for next year.
Next year, yeah.
So obviously, having touched on lots around individuals, but I think we've already started, the collaboration question has started to arise, and productivity and collaboration. And I think collaboration is probably, when I think from AbilityNet's perspective, we've had a ton of innovation projects underway in the last couple of years. And we've had to say to ourselves, in light of the pandemic, how are we going to do these together when we're geographically dispersed? And, you know, can we create collaborative opportunities that include everyone, that are accessible by design, but, and going back to what you just said, Natalie, allow for a little bit of spontaneity? And is that too much to ask altogether? You know, and we've come up with some exciting and wacky ways to do that. But it'd be great to hear from the panel really about their highs and lows with collaboration, and how technology and culture come into play. And I'd like to go to Melissa first here, actually, because we've worked quite a lot with higher education institutions, and I think collaboration in education has got some unique challenges. You don't just have the work colleagues, you've got the engagement of the students, and some of the things that you touched on earlier, Melissa, about coaxing people back or partially back. So tell us, what has your research and experience sort of brought to the fore, and what's the plan moving forward?
I think it's important to remember that there's a whole lot of jobs that don't have the option to work from home. All of the frontline facing jobs, all those library staff. I mean, the accommodations, the library, the security, the engineering labs, the hospitals where we were inventing the vaccines. You know, there's a lot of people who don't have the opportunity, the choice to work at a distance. And we must be careful as employers not to allow a situation where the people who have the option to do flexible seems like a much more advantaged position, because then you get a two-tier set of work, isn't it? That the people who have to come in and the people who have the privilege of working in these more hybrid and flexible ways. And as employers, you have to take a fair approach. So it would have to be clear to all of your staff why some people were getting to work in certain ways and some people were required to work in different ways. Those kinds of decisions that you make about what kind of flexible working arrangements are available to different kinds of staff in an organization that has many different professional roles in it, I think are quite challenging. And I think that what people are talking about with maybe, you know, whole swathes of types of people leaving particular kinds of work is a risk as well, because it means we might we will lose diversity of the kinds of people who are in the jobs, and the employer's responsibility to make adaptations to work, to office places, and to the jobs that you might do that are physically present, working in the library and working in the accommodation services. We need to make sure that everybody is still able, that employers are still aware that they need to make all of those adaptations to those jobs and not just assume that you will leave them. So I think there's a whole bunch of things that might play out quite differently. And with regard to what we learned about our staff, is that when everybody was during the pandemic, and we asked for data on people's characteristics, the number of people who declared a disability amongst the staff at the university went up to 16%, which is way higher than the data that we had before. So what I thought was quite interesting is that the only other time we perhaps gather this data is at point of recruitment. It's when you first get the job, you declare particular aspects of yourself. But we perhaps never ask you again, or perhaps people don't particularly choose to declare. So we went from thinking about 3% of the university staff had a disability that they wanted to declare to being 16%. And that, as an employer, means that you need to reconsider a whole bunch of the workplace adaptations that you might make and the strategic planning that you make for the workplace. I think it's also very interesting what people were saying about the environment in which you work, that actually, when we went into the research, we thought that the most influential factors might be disability or gender or caring responsibilities or age or whatever. But it actually turned out that the single most important factor with regard to whether people wanted to come back or to do hybrid was, in fact, their office environment, as to whether they were working in open plan or whether they had their own offices. So the people who had their own single offices have been much more keen on the idea that you might come back most of the time or some of the time, and the people who worked in open plan offices, who never really liked that anyway, really didn't want to come back. So from all the factors and characteristics that we thought would be the biggest influence, it actually was office environment. And I think that as well is a big important thing for people to think about, because we used to say, well, some employers used to say that the open plan offices was where you got that water cooler and that exchange of ideas and great team working. But of course, when so many people realized that actually they preferred to work from home, those that the shape of the office
layout right back up without having to do anything. You can also get there with a keyboard with Windows T and going to task.
Sorry, I've had a little bit of feedback there. No, I totally agree with you there, Melissa. And it's interesting, the office environments. I think open plan in its most basic form has really had its day, and a lot of premises are making use of some really innovative furniture and setups to have pods and breakout spaces, and trying to create, you know, things like the sound quality, having plants and separators to deaden noise, and outdoor and indoor spaces. It is about making the working environment really appealing to people to come in. And, you know, for those who have to come in every day, let's make that space work for them. And I think it's a ground up approach as well, rather than organisations deciding how it's going to suit the individuals, talk to the individuals and redesign the space. But also when you determine, I think someone said earlier, I can't remember if it was one of you guys or someone in the chat, around coming in for a purpose, let's make sure that the space works for those identified purposes. So if it's about collaboration, I'm like you, Lucy, very easily distracted. I can go to an office to collaborate, but don't ask me to go to an office and focus, because it's just not going to fly. And I think that's the challenge ahead again, isn't it? And, you know, the office industry, massive disruption there, but we're starting to see what's happening as they rebuild for the new way forward. So going back to Rena, you've obviously been home-based at AbilityNet since prior to the pandemic, so you've always had to collaborate predominantly via a remote approach. Can you sort of explain what good collaboration means for you, and what not so good collaboration might be, and perhaps how technology enhances that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I find online collaboration a lot easier than in-person collaboration. I can focus on the work and the outcome of the work rather than, you know, what facial expressions are people making, what's their body language, what are all of the other noises that are going on around me. You know, I find it really difficult to kind of drown out background noise. So I might get the doors opening and closing, or the cars going down the road, and that's all very distracting for me. But it's also kind of, you know, I often have to collaborate with other people. You know, I write reports in collaboration with other consultants on the team, and actually I find that things like Teams meetings or Slack calls are actually really useful. You know, instead of 2, 3, perhaps even 4, if you're showing things to people, crowding around one screen, all trying to see what's going on. And sometimes things can be, like, you know, really small on the screen. It can be quite difficult for everyone to see what's happening. And for me, everyone having their own screen and being able to see exactly what's happening has actually been much better. And I can kind of draw on things and say, oh well, when I do this happens, and you can point to stuff and circle stuff and things like that. And then you can switch screens. So if someone's maybe if you're training someone or someone's shadowing your work and they want to learn a bit more, you can kind of switch screens, and then they can do it, but you can kind of guide them as to where you're going. You know, even touching on kind of university and learning online, because I go to the Open University, I'm still doing my degree, and I had an online project, and, you know, we did our group project through group forums online, and that seemed to work quite well. And again, I found that a lot easier than when I was going to Brick University and failing. It was a lot easier doing the group work online than it was in person. You know, yeah, you do miss those kind of water cooler moments, the kind of just having a natter for the sake of having a natter, and building those relationships. You know, you don't necessarily get the, oh, we're going out for lunch, do you want to join us? But actually for me, that is better, because I don't feel like I have to say a particular thing so that they don't think I'm being rude or that I'm uninterested. You know, I do have those water cooler moments, because I might be on a call with someone and we'll be talking about work and we'll finish our topic, and somehow, you know, it happens. Somehow you get onto something completely unrelated to work and have a good answer. It just happens in a slightly different way. and that ability to kind of collaborate with people, but without loads of the things that I find really difficult, means that I've actually developed relationships with more people in my current job than I have ever in any of the previous jobs I've had, because I'm able to do it in a way that works for me. And it's also kind of, you know, I also get to spend the spoons and forks that I would in the office, just simply being in an office. I can spend those on my personal life. So I can have hobbies, I can have a social life outside of work. Whereas if I was in the office, I'd constantly be burnt out. I'd constantly be kind of exhausted by the environment I was in. And I that's all I would ever do. I would go to work, come home, sleep, go to work, come home, sleep. I would have nothing else in my life. And so having that option to work from home just changes my life completely.
And I'm going to make you blush now, Rena, but you know, in terms of flourishing in your role, Rena joined us. I can't remember when you joined us, but you joined us as a junior level accessibility consultant, and your progress has been mind-blowing going up. We have a sort of a detailed skills matrix within the accessibility team, where people have, you know, you can see what the skills that you need to acquire to move up through the levels of consultancy. And I think you are, you know, one of our record breakers in terms of the speed of progress that you've made. So when you contrast that with what you said around the level of burnout and so on that you might have experienced in prior roles, where that flexibility and ability to choose how you work wasn't present, it speaks for itself. Why would anyone create that situation for their fantastic staff?
Yeah, and I mean, I joined with literally, well, I had some self-taught knowledge around kind of web development, and I had a vague idea about the web content accessibility guidelines, which is what we test against. But, you know, fundamentally, I had no experience, I had no degree, I had no knowledge. And yet the fact that I've been allowed to work in a way that I was able to show my potential meant that I've developed so many skills, not just my professional skills and working through that kind of skills matrix and building, you know, all of those professional skills, but also, you know, the fact that I've been able to flourish in that way has drastically improved my own self-confidence. You know, I'm able to go out and be unapologetically me. You know,
Yay.
I go out and I am who I am. If you don't like it, go away. And you know, kind of, I mean, this is from, I think 6 years ago. I was working in a supermarket. I'd recently been diagnosed with autism, and I went in, I had a complete meltdown in the middle of the day, and they were so awful at dealing with it. And basically one of the store managers said, well, maybe this just isn't the job for you. And I was like, maybe you should be making some reasonable adjustments to help me. And that didn't happen. So I've experienced this kind of this awful experience of unsupportive managers and employers, and coming to AbilityNet has just been a whole different kind of experience for me, and it's really changed how I view myself in the world. And it's that flexibility, it's that understanding and flexibility, and if you give that to your employees, that they will give that back to you. You know, if I didn't have the flexibility, I would not be producing the work I produce and have the skills I've got. And it's kind of a two-way street, really.
So lucky to have you, Rena. Everyone's sharing the love in the chat as well. So yes, you mentioned how brilliant Teams has been for collaborating and other platforms like that. So sort of going back over to Natalie, and I saw someone else saying they use Teams channels for tea chats and all this sort of stuff, you know, generating the water cooler moments and all that kind of stuff. And actually, one of the things that's been quite fun about working on Teams and platforms of that nature is seeing all the new features popping up left, right and centre. And I just wondered if there was anything in particular that you could share of how those features came about, and whether, you know, whether it was led by customer feedback, and how do they feed in on these and other features?
Okay, good question, actually. Because yes, Teams, if you compare it to last year, January to today, it's a completely new product. There's a lot of additional functionality that we have built in. A lot of it was accelerated because of the pandemic, and most of it was also based on customer feedback, as in we need this today in order to make sure that, you know, we accommodate our people to work from home and to ensure that that goes in. But that also goes for the partners that we work with. You know, there's an icebreaker app, for example. What that did is, because I mean, I think a lot of you also, we ended up in this kind of mold where literally at 9 o'clock, your first meeting started, immediately the next one, 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 and there was no connection anymore. And that icebreaker app basically allows people, it just mixes everybody up and you end up in a meeting with God knows who. And you get to meet each other and to see each other. There's functionality as well. Obviously, the do not disturb is in there, but it also allows you to focus, to just bring in that focus time as well. Because that's the other thing. Again, meeting. When am I going to work? When are you going to leave me alone so I can actually just respond and do the work that we can actually do? That's also been added in, and with Viva, that is also coming into Teams, which you really just also see, you know, you can build that focus time into your calendar so that people do not book on top of it, which is so crucial. So technology supports that, right? But it all starts with people and respecting each other. And that is the one thing that I feel that often we lost in this whole thing, because everybody was busy and it was scheduling meeting above meeting and above focus time, etc. And that's just not what it needs to be. So the technology that we build, it's also about having those hybrid meetings, right? It's the raise hands functionality that you have in here, but it's also showing connections. It's showing hearts when you like something that is popped up, or clapping, to have that interaction when you're having those meetings and presenting. When we have new features also with regards to the presentation, to make sure that the person is on top of it, that you don't have to continue switching between watching the presentation, but also making sure that it's inclusive with captions so that everybody can read through it, translating slides as well, should you want to. Because here's the thing. Now, we're all comfortable talking online, right? We're all good in English and everything that comes up. How many people, there's a lot of people that for them going remote was not okay, because they're kind of like timid with regards to speaking up. All of a sudden online, it makes it even harder to do that. And this is where, you know, where they don't want to come in. So by raising their hand, they actually get the possibility to do that. But also, if I'm not comfortable with the language, you have the translation part as well that helps. So it literally is to build that inclusiveness more and more, especially with virtual meetings, to make sure that everybody get their say in, everybody can show them. And it's also about, you know, making sure that you switch on your camera so you can actually see how people are reacting. Because a lot of the time you actually get a feel for, is everybody agreeing with me? This morning I was in a meeting and it was like nobody had their morning coffee. It's the most horrible meeting that you can think of. You don't get any reactions, right? It's by switching on that camera that everybody's on the same field and you can actually read from people. It looks like you have something to say about that. Why don't you actually have that almost live interaction? So building that additional functionality in Teams for us has been crucial in order to make sure that the inclusiveness was there as well, and that everybody is playing the same role into meetings that comes on. But also with regards to asynchronous communication. Because when you're working from home, sometimes you might need to take a break. You might need to go, a certain meeting. It's okay to say no to a meeting because you can record it, you can read the transcript, and you can comment on it afterwards as well. And that's also key, that you're not expected to be in that meeting at the same time as everybody else, but still feel valued, that you're part of that meeting and yet you can comment on it and build on it. That's also an important part.
I do think having the chat remaining after meetings is a really good thing, because for you deeper thinkers, as you say, not everyone responds off the cuff straight away, and to be able to revisit that is really, really powerful. Definitely, but loads of flexibility in the tools, and then it's about building the culture around it that supports inclusivity. Nicola, I can see we're ticking through the time here, but I'd love to hear from BT. I've been reliant on BT from an infrastructure perspective, as many of us I'm sure have been. Your bandwidth has been pretty darn reliable, which has been great. But, you know, just generally from the BT side, what have been your sort of challenges and wins when it comes to collaboration?
Well, I think meetings has been a big one. Obviously, I do research, so it's not necessarily what we're doing in BT, but meetings, I think, is one of those things that really does need to be reinvented in terms of reinventing the ways that we work, because I do tend to wake up in the morning with an impending sense of Zoom. Obviously, other platforms are available. Teams just doesn't rhyme so well. You need to change Teams' name, I think. But anyway, I think the problem is particularly what was being described earlier, the problem is we've lifted and shifted this concept of a synchronous meeting into the digital world, and that has resulted in those death by meeting days. And I was talking to one customer the other day that said that they had measured that on average people had 7 seconds between meetings. And I know Microsoft has done some fantastic work on the effect on that on the brain. So literally the brain starts to boil halfway through the afternoon. And yeah, it's not a particularly productive way of working. And I think we probably need in the future of work, and particularly with hybrid working, the opportunity there is to say, maybe we are too addicted to synchronous meetings. Is there another way? So obviously asynchronous, we then need to build in time to do that. So maybe we need windows of opportunity where people are available for meetings, particularly if you are in a hybrid way. We know that remote workers work in very different ways to office-based workers. I call it time confetti when we're remote, because we do break up the day, and maybe we work a little longer. Maybe we start earlier, finish later. People who are office-based typically work in a chunk. So it might be Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, it might not, but typically it's a different way of working. And inevitably in a hybrid workplace, you are going to have a blend of people. Ultimately, I think hybrid has to be a digital first hybrid, because when you're looking at that common ground, in other words, is it accessible to everybody and is it appropriate to the task? It isn't all about the office. It isn't all about the home. It's actually around how do you build that interconnect. So I think a lot of the thinking that we're looking at the moment for the future of work is how do we think digital first hybrid, rather than revert back to, oh, let's look at the traditional ways of working and how we adapt that. So again, I think this is an interesting time to reinvent work to make it work, frankly, and not just lift and shift that concept of a synchronous meeting into the digital world.
Hugely agree. And I think we've got 2 minutes left. I can't believe where the time's gone. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to come off mute and share any thoughts? I'm putting you all on the spot now. I should have given you a few minutes to think about that.
There's been a lot of chat in there around saying, you know, water cooler moments, how they've sort of formalized the informal drop-in tea sessions. I know you mentioned that earlier on, and I think that's good to see. I think just in terms of, we've literally got 2 minutes left, and a little bit of summarizing as well. I thought it was really interesting what we were talking about just now. I think it was Natalie was saying it's the sort of the best of both and the privilege. Actually, I don't think it was actually. Who was it? It was Melissa, I think, saying about the best of both and the privilege. If you can come into the office and be at home, you literally do get both. So I think we need to be really careful how we balance this. And I loved that digital first hybrid. If we focus on getting digital right, then we can focus on the office and how those two interact. The other thing I picked up on was something around, and again, this came very much from Rena sharing her personal stories. And again, there's a lot of love for Rena in the chat there. I'm going to say that I think there's a lot of nodding as well on the screen and off the screen, I think. And I just wrote down, when nurtured, we flourish. just like clothes, one size never fits all. And I just think there's something about making it flexible, making it so we can adapt, but not expecting that there's just one thing we do and then that works for everybody. Because some of the stuff Rena was saying, I can understand that from her perspective, but that doesn't work for me. And that's fine. That doesn't mean one of us is right or wrong. It just means we're individuals. Amy, anything you wanted to chip in on?
No, I mean, amen to all of this, basically. It's just been such an energizing discussion. I think we're on the brink of some really exciting years ahead. Gosh, we've all been through the mill, but we've learned lots. I also feel like we've revealed more. People are feeling able to be authentic and bring their real selves to work in so many more instances. And I think our roles as obviously the people super bought into that is to take it to the masses, to again go to the outliers you were talking about earlier, Lucy. Melissa said the people who maybe are thinking, well, hang on a minute, I can't work at home. Well, let's create work environments that are as optimized for the widest audience as we possibly can. So I just, you know, I often feel excited, but I am very excited about the future of work and how we can, you know, build some, the new reasonable is going to be the new phenomenal, I think.
Absolutely. And what a great panel we've had today. Thank you ever so much, everyone, for taking part, you know, to Natalie, Nicola, Rima and Melissa, and to Amy for co-hosting with me as well today. It's been a pleasure.
High five to you all.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's been exciting.
And thanks for the people for getting involved on the chat as well. Really enjoying your comments, and you know, a lot of love there. So thank you everyone for joining in. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm sure someone will cut us off and kick us out the room next, because I have no control over
I'm
that.
going to hang up and assume that then everything's okay.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, guys. You take care.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.